totalitarian countries, you never know, which segment of the puzzle will be detrimental.
National Security Council is being abolished. They got rid of Georgia's intelligence service. They shut down information center on NATO and European Union.
Question is, does the country need a Security Council?
De facto government is doing everything in their power, basically, to make this happen.
Possible decision of visa suspension with Georgia inevitable.
About Gakharia, do you think that that's a personal vendetta within Ivanishvili?
A Russian-style systemic opposition parties.
That was the only case that I remembered when Georgian Dream administration basically resisted Russian demands.
I honestly don't know.
Hello and welcome to Talk Georgia, my English podcast covering Georgian and regional politics. Talk Georgia is brought to you by Droeba Media Group, a trusted source of very high quality media and analytical content, and GSAG, a think tank providing comprehensive political analysis of Georgia and wider Black Sea region, also academic and practical training for postgraduate students and mid-career professionals. By the way, if you'd like to become a sponsor to Talk Georgia and your name and logo appear on the screen, do not hesitate to contact us. So to dive into the developments that shape politics in and around this country, today we are joined by Dr. Lasha Dzebisashvili, Associate Professor at University of Georgia, Head of Politics and International Relations Program. Lasha holds a PhD in European Studies from the Free University of Brussels and the University of Bielefeld, and a master's degree in Strategic Security Studies from National Defense University in Washington. He was a senior civilian representative of Georgian MOD to the Georgian mission to NATO, served at a number of senior defense policy and planning related positions at the Georgian Ministry of Defense. Dr. Dzebisashvili is actively collaborating with Georgian think tanks, such as Georgian Strategic Analysis Center, which we both are founders of, and the Civil Council on Defense and Security, also Georgian Institute of Politics, to name a few. He's an author of multiple academic articles, as well as other publications. Dr. Dzebisashvili, welcome to my show. Did I miss anything important from your biography? If I did, please feel free to add. Then I'll move to the questions.
Thank you for having me here, and I think after such an introduction, I have no other way but to be perfect during your interview. Thank you again.
Okay, let's start talking about, based on your defense and security background, and the latest news is that the Georgian Dream is abolishing the National Security Council. This is the crisis management body under Prime Minister of Georgia. I think that 8 high-ranking officials should be part of it. I think it was established in 2019. Before that, National Security Council was under Georgian president. Then we had some period, as I remember, there were 2 security councils, one under president, the other one under prime minister. And now we are in a situation when the Georgian Dream is saying that they are abolishing it at all. By the way, also its facilities, including the National Situation Room, will be abolished. That is modeled after British Cobra, and I know that the Britain invested heavily in this project. But it's not a standalone thing, if you ask me. I think months ago, the Georgian intelligence service was merged with the state security service. Before that, information center on NATO and the European Union was shut down. National Security Council is being abolished. They got rid of Georgia's intelligence service. They shut down information center on NATO and European Union. What message is this, and what line is this? Is it a practical thing, or is it ideological? So is it like that they want everything to be like in Russia, kind of the Soviet system, and they're getting rid of everything Western related, or it's a practical thing? What's your take on this, Lasha?
I think, first of all, this is a very terrible message, because even Russia today has its own Security Council.
Ah.
So, I mean, we all know that the former president and the prime minister of Russia, Medvedev, is the guy who chairs the council. Regardless, the institutional frameworks matter, and even Putin, who is the top of the power pyramid in Russia, and he can do whatever he wants. Even he understands and considers Security Council as a kind of still necessary institutional framework. He needs to legitimize its own decisions. Again, regardless whatever decision he makes, we know that this is his own decisions, but he still needs some institutional framework to present it as a kind of an action, a decision that went through the deliberation process of this Security Council institutional framework. So now, coming back to the Georgian reality, we have a pretty long tradition of disregarding many of institutional frameworks in Georgia, specifically the National Security Council. We know that from the very beginning of the process of democratic transition in Georgia since 2003 Rose Revolution, the major emphasis made by our Western partners was to establish the institutional frameworks that make the political decision making informed, and that was the critical element of the entire political system. I mean, Georgians, not only the Georgian Dream Party, but also during the Saakashvili reign, more or less, during the Saakashvili period, they paid attention to the institutional frameworks, sometimes little, sometimes more, but more or less it was present. The Georgian Dream, since its arrival in 2012, made a significant shift from this tradition and started increasingly disregarding, all these institutional frameworks. And Security Council was critical in this regard because it really brings together all the different, institutions, all the different ministries into one place, all different sources of information, expertise, etc. It allows the government and top of the decision making basically to make an informed decision. And Georgian Dream heavily disregarded it. So, as you already mentioned, we had a period when initially, because of the political rivalry between the government, which was ruled by the Georgian Dream Party, and the president, who was more kind of pro-opposition guy, the Georgian Dream decided to create its own Security Council under the prime ministers. And then, by the way, once they made the constitutional amendments, initially the first kind of draft of the constitution didn't foresee any Security Council, which security experts, thinkers, foreign partners were heavily criticizing, and they were kind of shocked because how in this security environment, when you have a huge country that occupies 20% of your territory, then you have the major military conflict at that time, Karabakh conflict between your neighbors, etc. And you are a kind of a geopolitical place on the globe where several key energy and transport corridors run through. So how on earth you disregard all the basic necessary institutional frameworks to pay attention, to develop, to formulate your security strategies, and then basically implement and monitor your policies in this area. So Georgian Dream, again, it disregarded. It started disregarding even more increasingly over years. And we ended up in this, by the way, you were right absolutely that the British spent a hell of a lot of money. I think it was like 70 million euros or pounds they spent in the general infrastructure of the Security Council. But the point I was to make that since 2016, when we had huge flooding in Tbilisi, then we had forest fires, in Bakuriani and other areas, huge when the vast areas of Georgia were devastated by forest fire. So never actually the Security Council procedures, Security Council as an institution was have activated. So we never had any working level meetings,
practical
use of that. We had some couple of formal, for TV shows, etc., for some kind of a masquerade meeting, where the prime minister invited several ministers, and in front of journalists they kind of sat there and discussed for 15 minutes or something.
I remember those pictures, Giorgi managing crisis in Gakharia, Borjomi fires and all that stuff.
Yeah, but the point is that whenever something happened, the entire government, rushed to the area of crisis. They completely forgot that, in Tbilisi you had this kind of, all the infrastructure available that allowed you to monitor, etc. The only thing you had to do to activate this mechanism, to activate the individuals, to activate all your, sources at, at the location you had to connect information, etc. Basically, it degraded to the situation that the Security Council went into a kind of, how to say it, into a limbo. Nobody, everybody knew that the Security Council is there, but everybody also knew that this body never did anything meaningful. So you basically had people there, sat there, inventing, some kind of jobs for themselves and getting salaries for that, pretty high salaries, by the way. So from the practical point of view, you might argue, is it necessary to spend so much money for an institution that doesn't do anything? And the rationality element of your brain would answer no, better to kind of abolish it. But then the question is, does the country need a Security Council? Obviously, country needs the Security Council. And here we have these two kind of elements that we understand that, in fact, we cannot understand the logic of Georgian dream if the reality, the basic fundamental reality of national interest, of countries' security policies and strategy is to have respective institutional arrangements to develop such policies, to formulate them, implement and monitor, then we obviously need not only Security Council, but a lot of other security institutions at regional and local level that we don't have yet. But we ended up in this situation that, for some strange reasons, Georgian dream doesn't realize what the national interests are, what institutional arrangements a country needs to meet this national interest. And that leads us to other questions. What kind of interest then the Georgian dream does serve? And this is the big question.
Right, okay, let's move to another heavyweight issue for, I would say, Georgian people. Maybe Georgian people doesn't care too much about National Security Council, and I think even, not only Georgian Dream doesn't care about it, but also people don't really understand what it is all about. But what they do understand is that the danger of visa-free travel suspension, which is looming. And a few days ago, Polish Prime Minister Tusk was addressing the Polish Parliament, where he said that he's putting a coalition together to suspend or limit visa-free travel, not only for Georgia, obviously, but Georgia among them. And yesterday we got to know that there is already an agreement between the European institutions that new visa-free travel suspension mechanism will be in place very soon, most likely already in September, which extends, which makes it easier basically to suspend visa-free travel with the third countries, and extends the reason for suspension. Okay, until now, if we had only technical reasons, etc., for that, now there are political reasons. Okay, human rights, fundamental freedoms, if they are violated, significantly deteriorated relations with the EU also could become reason for suspension of visa-free travel. And the Commission that is taking the lead, and without asking the Council, Commission can basically suspend visa-free with the flick of a finger. So I think that the Georgian Dream de facto government is doing everything in their power basically to make this happen. My question to you is that, well, the way I see it is that it is imminent, it is coming. So unless we get rid of the Georgian Dream regime, the visa-free suspension will be there. Maybe this autumn, or maybe next year in winter or spring. It's just a matter of time. So my question to you is that how do you see, if this happens, how this will affect, again, Georgian people? Will it be a kind of wake-up call for many people? Just guys, wake up and stand up against Ivanishvili's dictatorial regime, because we're going to lose every benefit, not only visa-free travel, but some of the other benefits that we're getting from the European Union, or it might help the regime to further close the country and to make further repressions.
I think you are right by saying that Georgian Dream, in fact, did everything possible to isolate Georgia, to distance itself and to distance Georgia as a state from the European Union. We see, I think from 2020, specifically from the previous parliamentary elections, 2020, and after the violation of Charles Michel agreement, etc., we see a continuous effort by Georgian Dream that violates, single agreement, single condition. Georgia as a country and as a society, we've made with the European Union. All the conditions, basically, the European Commission developed, drafted, and laid on the table, saying here, I think there were these 9 major conditions spelled by European Commissions, where the European Commission basically said, there is this judiciary issue, there is this, freedom of information, there is this kind of question about the NGOs, and then political, and all the kind of seven key areas where Georgian Dream needed a significant effort to improve itself, to basically to retreat from these kind of radical positions of dictatorship or authoritarian advance that would allow then European Commission and Europe to consider Georgia again back being on the path of European membership. But what we have seen so far, that the Georgian Dream not only refused to implement these 9 major agreements, but it basically intensified its effort to kill all these 9 agreements and to make everything possible that nothing, nothing, even a slight indication would be there that tells you about some efforts, at least minor efforts, from Georgian Dream to develop this kind of rapprochement towards European Union. So we don't have it. So we have a second introduction of the Russian law, or so-called FARA, or even the an additional addendum to this laws, another law which is a law on grants that kills every single activities and makes it dependent completely on the green light endorsement willingness from the government. Basically, whatever, if you want to do anything and you receive foreign grants, it is the government that provides you with the final endorsement or refusal to do your activity, to conduct your activity. So it kills all the societal activities, all the NGO activities in Georgia, which is the major violation of the conditions spelled out by European Commission. Again, lots of unlawful steps and efforts to imprison politicians, to imprison political activists, social activists, etc. Absolutely unbearable situation with the transparency of the police force. So we have huge evidence, hundreds of cases where police used excessive force, basically on the brink of killing people, damaging physical condition of the people, almost killing them. But nobody was basically questioned even, within the police force. Nobody was brought to the court, and nobody took responsibility about that. So there are many of these actions where Georgian Dream signaled that it is not willing to compromise with the European Commission, with the European Union. In contrary, it continues everything possible to increase the isolation of the country from the European Union. And that makes, as you said, the possible decision of visa suspension with Georgia inevitable. Now, there's another question, when it might be possible to happen. Obviously not in summer, because the tradition of the European institutions are always to look, what Georgian authorities have done so far, and then based on the analysis of their steps to come up with some kind of proposals. So we will expect local elections in Georgia in October this year. There is this huge question whether opposition parties and society will decide to join it, the local elections. Whether some of opposition parties will boycott, but some will definitely decide to take part on these elections. Another question is whether these elections will be conducted according to the already existing rules, meaning that there is no control of the Electoral Commission, there is no transparency. Basically, all the possibilities of falsification are still there, and nobody is secured that something similar that happened in the elections in October 2024 will happen now in 2025 during the municipal local elections. So basically, the European Union will look whether there is some improvement in this regard, whether Georgian Dream made some steps towards kind of compromising, at least on that issue, electoral process, improving the atmosphere, improving the general conditions of the elections, whether there were some improvements in the composition of the election commission, etc. But if nothing similar happens, then there is, I think, not only the high likelihood that the European Commission will make this decision to suspend visa-free travel, but it will be inevitable, and there will be a guarantee that the European Commission will do this. Now, it can happen in October, it can happen perhaps in November, we don't know yet. And that brings up the next question: if this happens, what would be the reaction of the Georgian society and the political spectrum? I think until that, before municipal election, the majority of Georgian political opposition leadership will be put in jail.
Yeah, well, this is what is happening now.
This is what's going on, yeah. Now, the Russian law, or law on grants, are put in place, and obviously Georgian Dream will utilize all the power available by using this law to put also as many as possible social activists, NGOs, etc., either under pressure by imposing financial fees and financial penalties, which I think none of the members of the NGOs or founding fathers of the NGOs are able to pay, because they're astronomical sums. When we are talking about 1,000, 1,500 euros individually to be paid by NGO members. So the result will be a massive cleanup of the political spectrum and of the social activism and social activists, which obviously will necessitate a respective and proportionate response from the European Commission. Whether this will be, again, I'm still a proponent. I'm a proponent of a measured approach. I think since this mechanism, the new mechanism of suspension of visa-free travel, is already there, European Commission can do it and can implement it as a ultima ratio, as last resort. And I think until that, there are a lot of other mechanisms that European Commission can bring in, such as increasing sanctioning mechanisms, Georgian Dream members, etc., etc., and
or even limiting the visa-free travel, for example, to a certain sections of the population.
That's true. I mean, again, it's we all in IR we know sanctions already are kind of very very dubious area, because whenever you impose general sanctions on a nation, it usually targets population.
Weakest.
Yeah. It usually targets, and 10% of, or let's say elites that benefit from the existing situation, they still find some kind of loopholes, some areas where it can still survive, and again, all this burden of sanctions, then lies on the shoulders of general population. Russia or Iran is a perfect example of that. Now, do we want to achieve this with Georgia, given ever increasing speed and intensity of Georgian Dream propaganda and disinformation that targets European Union, that targets the general European idea? And we know that whenever some kind of drastic measure is introduced by the European Union against Georgia, be sure that this element will be used in the Georgian Dream propaganda to mobilize their supporters against the European idea, against the European Union, and basically spread the idea among other sectors of Georgian population to show them, you see now, it's the European Union that doesn't want us Georgians to be a part of them, and they don't care. Even if we Georgian Dreams are the main, let's say, culprits of their sanctions, they don't care. They punish everybody. They punish the general population of Georgia. So there's this kind of 50-50 possibility, again, with the likelihood increasing, significantly increasing, if the municipal or local elections will be held in the same manner as they did in October 2024. But the reaction, the second part of your question, the reaction of Georgian people, I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know, because when the authoritarianism or the authoritarian rule, which then enters the phase of basically a personal dictatorship, it doesn't happen like overnight. So we experience this kind of creeping authoritarianism since openly since I think 2018, 19, Gavril of Night and etc. When all these kind of hybrid warfare measures were applied by Russia. Increasingly, they were visible in Georgia. And it's very difficult for Georgian generally, if you look at the political science literature, that deals with the authoritarian rules, that deals with dictatorships, that deals with the democratic change, how to manage, to shift from authoritarian rule to democratic transition. You understand how difficult it is for a society to respond to some authoritarian attack if the society is not consolidated, if the society doesn't have its political representation, in the political system, and it is heavily dominated by government disinformation and propaganda. Plus, you have a foreign external power that is looming, upon you as an external military threat, and basically is controlling your government. So we have a very, very unique situation where everything speaks against Georgia. Now, the Georgian society showed unbelievable resilience since November 2024. Actually, even before, when the first time the Russian law was introduced. Will we be able to continue with the same degree of resilience? Will we be able to produce new leaders that would be able to consolidate the resistance against this authoritarian advance? It remains to be seen. But the problem of Georgian political system was always, and it still is there, that despite the Georgian Dream's efforts to clean up the political field and basically eliminate the existing political opposition, political parties and opposition party leaders, the fact is that the political opposition parties do not represent the significant part of Georgian population. The facts and numbers should not mislead you. The results of the parliamentary elections 2024 do not directly say that the opposition parties have the same level of support, strong support in the society. These votes were protest votes. If for example, myself, I don't have any opposition parties I would vote for, absolutely not. But the decision to go and vote for some or any opposition party was because of my protest feeling that and that was,
quite a lot of people are like that.
A lot of people, hundreds, I think hundreds of thousands. And the reaction and basically the behavior of political opposition parties after parliamentary election has even increased the sentiments. The sentiments mean that you are not able to do anything, you are not able to cooperate, you basically do not represent the Georgian society. And by that, we arrived at that point, the Georgian Dream, by eliminating this kind of political opposition that is not representing the Georgian society, it creates a unique situation, unique condition when the Georgian society can produce new representatives, new leaders, new leadership that would then create perhaps a more healthy, more representative political opposition. It remains to be seen. We don't know yet, but again, the political system is not a sterile system. It's not a kind of vacuum where nothing happens. No, it's a kind of, there are rules, and they're like, the social and political science is still science. There are rules, and there is causality moments everywhere. So we have to see whether Georgian society is politically, how to say it, ripe enough,
mature
enough to produce this kind of leaders, this kind of leadership, and then force Georgian Dream to retreat.
You mentioned that, for example, the Georgian Dream, our Bidzina, is cleaning up the political ground now, and the fact is that, yes, half of the political leaders are behind the bars now, another half is waiting when they're going to be behind the bars. Let's say, look at what happens with Gakharia, what is happening around Gakharia. Because one thing is that whether you turn up at Tsolukiani's commission or not, and because of that, whether you end up in prison for a year or maybe get fined heavily for that. Well, that's one story, and this is what's happening with all the other political leaders. But with Gakharia now, when Georgia's prosecutor office started probing the issue when he erected this Chorchana, checkpoint, and the way I see it is that I think Gakharia will be blamed in treason or try to drag Georgia into war or tensions with Russia. Indeed, in that time in 2019, I remember that flared certain tensions with this checkpoint issue, but that was the only case that I remembered when Georgian Dream administration basically resisted Russian demands.
Yeah.
So again, my question is, I have two questions basically about Gakharia. Do you think that that's personal vendetta of Bidzina Ivanishvili? Because I remember his interview before the elections when he kind of threatened Gakharia and his party members to put in jail, or do you think it's politics and the Bidzina is trying to get at something? Get some of the political parties dragged into the local elections, for example. Do you link it to the, extended politics, or it's just personal issue? One thing, and second thing, do you think that Georgian Dream now is facing a dilemma? Very hard dilemma what to do with all these political leaders, because either they have to put everybody behind the bars, because, apart from Gakharia, everybody refused to turn up at Tsolukiani's commission, which is a crime. well, according to the Georgian Dream laws, or if they are not, if they don't have guts for it, then they have to release everyone. And if they gonna release everyone, that would be perceived as weakness for the regime. And I think if anybody realizes that, it's Bidzina himself, that if they show any type of weakness, that could result into, I don't know, very serious problems of the regime. So, so what do you think about all this?
I think there are multiple theories, that can explain this kind of behavior. Some of the theories do not contradict each other at all. But I think generally, having observed a general strategy the Georgian Dream follows, specifically after the second introduction of the Russian law. I think their strategic decision is basically to firmly establish here a kind of Belarusian style of dictatorship. This is their strategy. And because there is no rationality, there is no logic, political logic that would explain this kind of an uninterrupted effort by Georgian Dream to damage itself politically by pulling through this second version of the Russian law, although they admitted, while they did it first time, that would never introduce the law again. But they did it. And by the way, this not only did damage their credibility, whatever they say or whatever they promise, but also it was counter-logical and counterproductive in terms of domestic political perspective, because if you had looked at the situation conditions before the parliamentary election, somewhere in April, May, before the second introduction of the Russian law, the Georgian Dream was a super strong party with the huge rates of popularity. They could easily get 2/3 of seats in the parliament, basically securing constitutional majority and do whatever they want.
You mean before the introduction of the Russian law?
Before the introduction of the Russian law. So then the second introduction of the Russian law, the first introduction, second introduction of the Russian law, it really did heavily damage, the reputation of the Georgian Dream. So that, all the polls before parliamentary elections in September, August showed that they were able to kind of secure 40, maximum 45% of votes or seats in the parliament, but not the majority, and forget about the 2/3 of the seats in the parliament. But they still did it. They pulled through. They did not only this, but immediately after the rigged and falsified parliamentary elections, they didn't wait too long, and they announced this famous decision in November 28 that they're going to suspend the negotiation process with the European Union, which is obviously also counterproductive, knowing well that almost 85% of Georgian population is firmly, for the European integration and is willing to join European Union, because almost 1/3 of the entire Georgian population is now residing in the countries of the European Union. Now, all this tells me that the strategic line is there. So Georgian Dream is pursuing the strategic line of isolating Georgia from its Western partners. It knows very well that it cannot do this final breaking away, from the European Union before the domestic political and societal situation is not brought under full and unconditional control of Georgian Dream. So now we will face the process of full domination, or we call it, authoritarian advance. My expectation is that all the members of political opposition parties that won't cooperate, that will not cooperate with the Georgian Dream, they will be brought in jail. The same will happen with the public activists and leaders. And only these so-called opposition parties that used to cooperate with the Georgian Dream or will be pressured and then basically abide by this pressure and will then start cooperating with the Georgian Dream. Inevitably, they have to become a so-called, a Russian-style systemic opposition parties. This is the final objective of the Georgian Dream. And after that, then we will see a final declaration that Georgia is no longer interested in the European Union, etc., and we are kind of adieu, and we kind of
sovereign state,
whatever sovereign state,
sovereign democracy,
whatever, etc. And we already see also more and more attempts to normalize a working level relationship with the Russian Federation. Just recently, there was this information that a Russian key businessman,
a delegation of kind of some energy company, whatever, a guy who is sanctioned by the European by everybody
Union.
In the world.
He had even the working meeting with the Minister of Economy in Georgia,
exactly.
which is a shocking news to me because obviously we know the reasons why this news is shocking. But this is another level of attempts to normalize relations with Russia, and after this final divorce with the European Union, then we will see a full-blown normalization, so-called normalization of relationship with Russia. Again, whether there will be a radical or harsh response from the Georgian society remains to be seen, but the logic of the action by Georgian Dream is very clear to me. This is a full domination of the political, economic, and societal activities in Georgia.
Okay, let's zoom out a little bit, and I could kick myself not to ask you about the Israeli-Iran conflict that is kind of unfolding now, and you as it's very interesting, your view on that as a defense specialist, and also based on, what is going to happen there, how it can possibly affect the region and Georgia itself. I think it's clear, so Iran is not necessarily in the kind of good situation now. Israel has almost 100% domination in the Irani sky, so they are obliterating the targets as they wish. I think there were statements. Again, from Western allies, there are generally positive statements about Israel, which is not the case in many situations. I think President Trump yesterday posted on his social media that it was the unconditional surrender. What options do you think that Irani Ayatollah regime has at the moment? Do you expect the Irani people would revolt and we will see the end of Ayatollah era and regime change? Or you think that it will be more like Irani government would sit at the negotiating table with very limited options and would say no to their nuclear program and ambitions? So, how see this story develop and what impact it might have on the Georgia and the wider region?
Okay, I have to start with a very cautious statement that we know what we actually should know. So we don't know many things. There are so many unknowns. And the information we receive from in and around Iran is the information which is very much controlled by respective sources that release this information. So we don't know, first of all, whether there is already a decision to pursue the policy of regime change. There are many rational arguments that would state or that would basically motivate the Israeli government to seek the regime change, because if there is no regime change and the same mullah regime remains in Iran, we might expect, first of all, Israel might be sure that you will still have a hostile country, a huge country, will have strategically again to recover from this defeat, and then basically Israel will remain enemy number one for decades to come. So second, the nuclear facilities and infrastructure might be defeated, might be destroyed, but it doesn't mean that other sources, other mechanisms, other influence, tools that Iranian regime had in place. I mean, it's severely damaged in Syria, in Lebanon, even in Iraq. But again, having a 90 million strong country with huge oil and gas reserves, etc., somehow recovering from these fatal results of this war doesn't create a guarantee that you have a friendly nation. So you have to think strategically and kind of calculate what is better for you: a hostile regime for decades to come, a kind of no man's land, because you know there will be some parties that will start in Iran to battle against each other for power and domination. Keep in mind that the regime always has a certain section of the population that supports it. So in Iran you have the power agencies like the army, you have this, Islamic guardians, etc. Millions of people who basically served this power structure, who also heavily benefited from the structure. Now there is this momentum. It seems from outside that you can change this power structure by whatever, externally you basically damage the structure radically, but whether the structure collapses or will collapse entirely, this is still unclear. If this uncertainty remains over, certain period of time, longer than, let's say, 1 month, we can assume that regime supporters start again to kind of consolidate around certain leaders, and then trying again to recover power and reestablish their dominance in the not only in the political, but again, most importantly, within the power pyramid of the system. So we don't know what is going on the ground. Whether there will be some, all of the sudden some opposition party reemerge in Iran and starts calling, their supporters to finish the Mullah regime, and then it will be supported by army units or some even, regional forces. I don't know. It's still, in such kind of totalitarian countries, you never know, which segment of the puzzle will be detrimental for the regime.
Absolutely.
We saw in Russia Prigozhin's march towards Moscow, and nobody resisted this much. And Prigozhin, I mean, come on. He used to be the very element of this power pyramid in Russia. So you never know whether something similar will happen in Iran. The second question is, if nobody wins, I mean, neither former regime or still existing regime, nor the future whatever opposition leaders, and Iran plunges into a civil war-like situation, how this will affect a general regional situation. And I'm not talking about the energy routes and the closing the Hormuz Straits and damaging the energy infrastructure and all this stuff. So because the parties will need to take control over, over the financial and economic vessels of the country that keep you alive. So there are many unknowns. I don't know yet. For sure, there will be massive flows of migrants from Iran. I assume this will be kind of more wealthy individuals that want to, basically, for a certain period of time, to wait up and see how the situation will unfold in Iran. Neighboring countries will take a major hit in this regard, like Turkey, Pakistan, Afghanistan, or perhaps Azerbaijan and Armenia. We as Georgians, we also have a significant Iranian minority here who are also economically here active in Georgia.
And
Also
plus
young
we have
people,
visa-free travel
visa-free
with
travel.
Iran.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We might see also a significant increase of Iranian migrants in Georgia as well. But whether this will affect significantly the regional status quo, for sure, there will be no 3+3 format for Georgia. It's done. As for Russia, this is a heavy blow already for Russia's strategic, strategic acts of, we call it evil. But Iran was a huge member, huge supporter of Russia strategically on the global scale. And this is a heavy blow for Russia, economically, militarily, and reputation-wise. The Russians already, not only the Russians, but when I say Russians, I mean Russian propagandists and Russian, state-controlled media, etc. They already cry about what's going on in Iran and how Iran is deleted out of this strategic formula that Russia created in this region and globally. It is also a heavy, I think, a clear signal, not direct, but a clear signal to authoritarian regimes globally, that sometimes, so-called black swans arrive on the scene and regimes then falter. So, and I think that's exactly also a clear argument in the negative sense for Georgian dream, that they will see that and then they will do whatever possible to consolidate their power.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dzebisashvili. Thank you for watching us, to listening to us. Please like us, subscribe to us, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you.